So, Ian, can you describe the impacts and how the students have adapted to the training schedules?
Yeah, sure, Glenn. So, I mean, initially there's the sort of first two priorities we had once we realised we're in the sort of COVID situation. Is obviously the main thing is our sort of students and their staff safety and well-being. And then secondly, we wanted to make sure that the cadets, there was no impact on their training in terms of the continuity, because that's obviously key at an ab initio level. We need to make sure that cadets are getting continuity in all of their training. So we quickly set about setting up our virtual airline training platform, which is basically remote learning. So we first of all had to scope out how that was going to work. We had to make sure all of our instructors were trained on how to use it. And then obviously we had to get approval from the regulator. So we worked about that very quickly, and within a week we had all of that process in place. We then ran a few trials with some of the staff being the trainees, including myself. We gave some feedback and we slightly tailored and adapted the methodologies that we're using, and then we started delivering the training live with the cadets.
So what was the changes the instructors had to make then, apart from just the remote learning, in terms of how they were teaching the students?
Well, it's a faster pace when you teach remotely, because you don't get the sort of natural cues, although you can see the cadets' faces and so on. You don't get all of the body language feedback you normally would in a classroom, so it makes the delivery a lot faster. So the instructors have to be aware of that and to really enforce themselves to actually slow down.
And do you think over the course of like a student's training career, I mean, do you think this is going to make any impact, hold them back in any way in the future, or is it a case of just carried on as normal?
Yeah, I don't think it will hold them back. I don't think their training has suffered from it. The only piece that they would have potentially missed out on is that teamwork. But the extra pieces that we're putting in, I think, sort of compensate for that. And I think they'll look back on this as hopefully a once in a lifetime event, and really it's helped develop their resilience. So, I think although we wouldn't obviously plan and have wanted this, they've dealt with it really well. And I think it will help build their characters going forward.
And in terms of like the students passing through now, the actual flying hours, making up hands in the cockpit, hours in the cockpit, how's that going to change? How is Skyborne looking ahead with that?
But in terms of the returning to training, I mean, we're doing that now. So we've started back flight training, and we've put in a lot of procedures. We've done a big risk assessment on the operation and mitigations, and to make sure that the safety and the well-being of our instructors and trainees is minimised. The risk is minimised, and that's been well received by all of the trainees and the staff. And so far so good. It's all moving forward, and they're back flying.
Yeah, and in terms of the incident and pandemic as a whole, are you going to take any elements or training elements away from what you've learned and use them in the future? Because I mean, it's always everyone looks at this thing as very bleak, which it is, but there's been some real innovative training going ahead across the industry. So
yeah, I think so. I think I don't think virtual training will ever replace face-to-face training in its entirety. But there's certainly elements that we've learned from it in terms of the virtual training that we do for ground school can enhance the face-to-face tuition that we have. So we are looking at ways that we can learn from those experiences and build that into the training package going forward. So that, for example, in ground school, they'll still have all of their lessons as they would do. We'll enhance that through some virtual learning as well, to have access to in the evenings, the sort of pre-recorded things like that will help sort of cement some of those foundation topics that we're covering in the classroom.
Yeah, and the training industry as a whole, I mean, how do you think it's going to manage? Because obviously there's a demand for commercial pilots, and then it's dropped off again a little with what's going on. How do you see it in the future? I mean, is there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it will come back. It's just a question of timing, really. I mean, all the sort of challenges we've seen in the cyclical events over time, like SARS, 9/11, the financial crisis, there's always been a dip, but then it's recovered. And when the recovery comes back, it's usually at more an exponential rate than ever. So I do feel that once the consumer confidence has come back into airline movements, I mean, people always need to travel for leisure and businesses. So once that confidence comes back in the market, I think then we'll see the training businesses picking up again and seeing more interest. I mean, ourselves at Skyborne, it's been actually one of our busiest periods for new inquiries and sales over the last couple of months, which is, you think is strange, but I think a lot of people are taking the view that if you start a program now, in 18 months' time, the industry is hopefully well on the way of recovery, and then would be a good time to be coming out into a market that's starting to expand again. And obviously the challenge is for those that are coming out between now and that point of recovery, but that's why we've launched this skills continuation training, to make sure that there's no skill fade and we continue to support the trainees. So, we're quite optimistic here at Skyborne. We think things will come back, and we're seeing, the sort of interest levels there and continuing to increase.